Well, it happened. We bought a locomotive. I will explain who we are in a minute, but in the meantime, can you guess what locomotive it is? Stay tuned and find out. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Nate and this is Nate's Vintage Trains. If you do like what you see, please consider subscribing, it does help me out. And like this video or comment down below to give me that little bit extra support. I thank you very much for doing so. On this channel, I've showcased a wide variety of different types of trains. Models, miniature ride-on trains or live steam, and real steam locomotive, diesels, electrics, anything you could think of, and some of my own models on occasion. One of these varieties is live steam, specifically 7.5-inch gauge locomotives at Southern California Live Steamers, down in Torrance. A fellow member and, of course, a friend of mine, Richard, who has been featured in a few videos, including his own demonstration of a Valesco live steam traction engine, the 3751 event at Fullerton back in September. He assisted in firing up a coal-fired live steam locomotive that he had been working on at the club, and he was even in the Los Angeles Live Steamers video I did a while back. Richard and I bought a 7.5-inch gauge live steam locomotive. The cost was split half and half between us, and this includes costs of materials and getting the locomotive operational. The locomotive we acquired is a propane-fired vertical boiler, four-wheeled, vertical cylinder, 7.5-inch gauge locomotive. It was built in 1965 by a Los Angeles Live Steamers member named Hutch Cooper. There are some very short clips of Mr. Cooper operating the locomotive at LALS. By 1976, this locomotive was sold to another member and then sold once again by 1990. The last boiler test done on the locomotive was done in 2002 at Los Angeles Live Steamers. And for the last 20 years, it has been sitting outside under tarps in Carlsbad, California. The acquisition of this engine was pretty interesting. We first learned about the engine through a person who was working the merchandise booth for the 3751 event at Fullerton. Richard and I mentioned that we were part of Southern California Live Steamers, and she happened to have, or her family happened to have, a live steam locomotive that they weren't using. Richard and her exchanged numbers. Next thing you know, we got a locomotive. Since I live 2 hours north of Torrance, Richard went down to Carlsbad himself to pick it up and bring it to SCLS. Over the past few months, we have been working on the locomotive. I have been dealing with the tender, and Richard has been or will be dealing with the locomotive. The first thing we did when we acquired the locomotive was test it on air. The cylinders were a little bit stiff, but after some greasing and cleaning up, the cylinders turned over. However, it's not operational since it is chain-driven between the cylinder drive shaft and the drive wheels. Later, a boiler test was conducted with help from some of the SCLS members. The test concluded that the boiler was sealed and everything on the outside was dry and nothing was leaking. That is the biggest thing on a steam engine. However, there was a fitting that was leaking, which meant the boiler could not be brought up to proper testing pressure. The tender, however, on a simple test, turned out to have 3 holes in it. This tender fully rusted through, and whatever rust was left was barely hanging on. So I made a new tender made out of wood, and the inside of it was lined with fiberglass. Another part of the tender was the handbrake. It used wooden brake shoes and a simple metal handle which was detached. More on this locomotive will be shown in the future, hopefully with the locomotive present, with Richard and I actually doing stuff and talking about it. But in the meantime, thank you for watching this video. This has been Nate's Vintage Trains, reminding you to keep it old school, and until next time, in Jesus' name, may God bless you all.